They dragged her across marble floors polished with money she once helped earn, past chandeliers that reflected nothing but power, pride, and cruelty. Laughter followed her humiliation, soft, expensive laughter from people who believed status was destiny and weakness was permanent. Coffee dripped down her uniform like a final insult, warm against her skin, as security guards tightened their grip, and the woman who ordered it all smiled with the certainty of someone who had never been punished for her sins. To them, she was just a black waitress again, disposable, silent, forgettable. No one noticed the way her spine stayed straight. No one questioned why she didn't beg. No one saw the calm in her eyes, the kind that doesn't belong to victims, but to people who already know the ending. And as the heavy doors slammed shut behind her, sealing her humiliation in public memory, a single truth hovered unseen in the air. This was not her downfall. It was her return. Because the woman dragged out like trash that night was no longer who they thought she was, and the empire that would soon kneel had just laughed at its future queen. The chandeliers above the Grand Elon restaurant glowed like frozen stars, casting warm gold light over polished marble floors and silk-draped tables. This was a place where money spoke softly but carried power, where every glass of wine cost more than a month's rent for most of the city, and every person inside mattered to someone important. Except the staff, especially the waitresses. Ava stood near the service corridor, hands clasped behind her back, posture perfect, face calm. Her black and white uniform fit neatly, pressed within an inch of its life. No jewelry, no makeup beyond the bare minimum. Hair pulled back tight, not a strand out of place. She had learned long ago that invisibility was survival. Table 12 is waiting. The floor manager whispered sharply as he passed, not slowing, not looking at her face. Ava nodded once. Yes, sir. She picked up the silver tray, 2 glasses of imported mineral water, 1 rare steak, 1 truffle pasta, and stepped into the dining area, her steps measured, quiet. Years of training had taught her how to move without being noticed, how to exist without disturbing the illusion that wealth ran this world alone. At table 12 sat Serena Vale. Everyone knew Serena. She was dressed in cream-colored designer silk, hair sleek, lips painted the perfect shade of authority. Diamonds rested casually at her ears, understated but unmistakably real. She laughed softly at something her companion said, the sound confident, practiced, like someone who had never been told no and never expected to be. 2 private guards stood a few steps behind her chair. Not restaurant security, personal security, the kind that followed money, power, and danger. Ava's steps slowed, just slightly. She knew that face. She hadn't expected to see it again. Serena Vale had once been her boss. The woman's eyes lifted as Ava approached, scanning the table automatically, then froze. For a fraction of a second, the mask cracked. Then Serena smiled. Not warmly, not kindly, recognizing. Ava placed the plates down carefully, her hands steady despite the sudden tightening in her chest. Your order, she said evenly. Serena didn't touch her food. Instead, she leaned back in her chair and tilted her head, studying Ava like an unpleasant memory she'd just remembered how much she enjoyed. Well, Serena said slowly, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. Look at this. Her companion glanced up, confused. What? My former waitress, Serena said, eyes never leaving Ava. I knew that posture looked familiar. The word former landed like a slap. Ava straightened. Is there a problem with your order, ma'am? Serena laughed, sharp, amused. Oh no, not at all. I'm just surprised. I assumed you'd disappeared. A few heads turned. The restaurant grew subtly quieter, that special hush that followed public discomfort. Ava met Serena's gaze. She didn't smile. She didn't apologize. I'm just doing my job, she said. That seemed to irritate Serena more than anger ever could. You always said that, Serena replied. Even when you were wrong. Her companion shifted uncomfortably. Serena, do you know, Serena continued, ignoring him. This girl used to work for me? Couldn't keep up. Always trying her best. Ava said nothing. She remembered. She remembered the 14-hour shifts. The insults disguised as jokes. The day Serena accused her of stealing tips she'd never touched, and fired her in front of customers, loud and smiling, like it was entertainment. Serena picked up her coffee cup now, turning it slowly between manicured fingers. You know, she said, voice light. I don't think people like you should be allowed in places like this. It ruins the atmosphere. Ava felt heat rise in her chest. But she kept her voice calm. If there's nothing else, I'll return to my station. She turned to leave. Wait. The word cut through the air. Ava stopped. Serena stood. The guards behind her straightened instinctively. Serena stepped closer, heels clicking against marble, eyes sharp with something cruel and satisfied. I didn't dismiss you, she said. I fired you once. I can do it again. Ava turned slowly to face her. I don't work for you, she said quietly. The smile slipped from Serena's face. She lifted the coffee cup. Time seemed to slow. Nearby diners watched now, some with curiosity, some with unease, none intervening. Power was a spectacle, and no one wanted to interrupt it. Serena's arm moved. The coffee flew. It splashed across Ava's uniform, hot liquid soaking into fabric, dripping onto the floor. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Ava didn't scream. She didn't flinch. She looked down at the spreading stain, then back up at Serena. Something unreadable passed through her eyes. Serena exhaled, satisfied. Guards, she said casually. Get her out of here. I don't want to see her face again. The guards moved instantly. One took Ava's arm. Firm. Not brutal, but unyielding. The floor manager rushed forward, pale. Ms. Vale, perhaps. Serena raised a hand without looking at him. Do it, she said. Ava felt the grip tighten. For a moment, memories surged. Being shoved out of Serena's office years ago, clutching her things while people stared. Being told she was nothing, that she'd never amount to anything. The restaurant blurred at the edges. But then, she breathed, slowly, and she lifted her chin. Let go, she said, not loudly but clearly. The guard hesitated. Just for a second. Serena noticed. Now, they pulled her toward the exit. Chairs scraped as people leaned back to avoid contact. Whispers followed. Phones tilted discreetly, recording. Ava walked. She didn't struggle. She didn't beg. At the door, she turned her head slightly and met Serena's eyes one last time. There was no anger there. Only certainty. This isn't finished, Ava said softly. Serena laughed. For you? It's been finished for years. The doors swung open. Cool night air hit Ava's face as she was pushed outside onto the stone steps. The doors closed behind her with a heavy finality. Inside, applause broke out at one table, nervous, brief. Life resumed. Serena sat back down, heart racing pleasantly. Honestly, she said, lifting her napkin, some people never learn their place. Across the room, unnoticed by everyone but one, a man in a dark suit lowered his glass. His gaze followed the doors Ava had been dragged through. He smiled faintly. She's back, he murmured. Outside, Ava stood alone under the city lights, coffee dripping from her uniform onto the pavement. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her phone. One message blinked on the screen, sent moments earlier. Unknown contact. Did it happen? Ava typed calmly. Ava. Yes. A pause. Then a reply. Good. She looked back at the restaurant doors, her expression unreadable. They had dragged her out like trash. They had no idea what they had just touched. And they had no idea who she was becoming. Ava learned early that the world rarely noticed people like her unless it needed something cleaned, carried, or erased. She grew up in the southern edge of the city, where buildings leaned into one another like tired elders and streetlights flickered as if unsure they wanted to keep working. Her mother worked 2 jobs, laundry by day, diner shifts by night, and still came home exhausted, hands cracked from soap and heat. Ava learned how to cook before she learned how to rest, how to stretch meals, how to be quiet when adults were tired. By 16, she was working weekends. By 18, full-time. School had taught her numbers and words. Life taught her silence. When her mother died suddenly, an untreated illness, a hospital bill they couldn't afford, Ava didn't cry in public. She signed papers, packed their apartment into 2 suitcases, and moved into a rented room that smelled of mildew and old regrets. That was when she met Serena Vale for the first time. Serena owned Vale Dining Group, a growing chain of luxury restaurants that catered to investors, politicians, and celebrities who preferred their privacy, served alongside imported wine. Ava applied for a server position at one of Serena's flagship locations. She wore her best shirt to the interview. Serena barely looked up from her tablet. "You've worked fine dining before?" she asked. "No, ma'am," Ava said honestly. "But I learned fast." Serena smiled thinly. "Everyone says that." Ava got the job anyway. Not because Serena believed in her, but because Ava was cheap, quiet, and desperate. The kind of employee who said yes without asking how much more it would cost her. At first, Ava tried harder than anyone else. She memorized menus in 3 languages, learned which clients tipped generously and which demanded perfection for nothing. She stayed late without complaining, covered shifts without question, cleaned messes that weren't hers. And Serena noticed. Not with praise. With expectation. "Why isn't table 7 cleared yet? Don't stand like that. Fix your face. Smile more." Not like that. Every mistake, real or imagined, was corrected publicly. Every success went unacknowledged. Once, Ava politely asked for a day off to handle paperwork after her mother's death. Serena sighed loudly in front of the staff. "Everyone has problems," she said. "You think you're special?" Ava worked the shift. She always did. The incident that ended everything happened on a Thursday night. The restaurant was full. A private event occupied half the floor. Serena was entertaining investors, laughing loudly, playing the gracious host. Ava was assigned to the VIP section. One guest accused her of stealing cash from his table. The claim made no sense. Cameras covered the floor. Tips were pooled. Ava had never once been written up. But Serena didn't investigate. She didn't check footage. She didn't ask questions. She called Ava to the center of the room. "Empty your pockets," Serena ordered. Ava's hands shook as she did. Nothing. Serena's lips tightened, not in relief, but annoyance. "Well," she said loudly, "even if you didn't steal, clearly you make my guests uncomfortable." Ava felt the room tilt. "I didn't do anything wrong," she said softly. Serena leaned closer. "You did something. You existed." Laughter followed. Uncomfortable, cruel laughter. Serena fired her on the spot. Security escorted Ava out while customers watched, whispering, judging, assuming. That night, something inside Ava broke, but something else hardened. After that, no one would hire her. Word traveled fast in luxury circles. Difficult. Accused. Problematic. She sold what little she owned. Slept in cheap rooms. Skipped meals. Some nights, she sat on her bed staring at her hands, wondering how a life could unravel so quickly. But Ava didn't disappear. She adapted. She took night jobs. Cleaning. Deliveries. Anything that paid in cash. It was during one of those late shifts that everything changed. Ava was leaving a closed office building just after midnight when she heard shouting in the parking garage. 2 men arguing. One voice older, strained. She should have kept walking. She didn't. She rounded the corner and saw an elderly man on the ground, clutching his chest, 2 younger men panicking beside him. "Call an ambulance," Ava shouted, already kneeling. One of the men froze. "We can't." "Then move," Ava snapped. She remembered what her mother had taught her. Compressions. Breathing. Pressure. Time. She worked until sirens cut through the night. The man survived. He opened his eyes in the ambulance and looked at Ava like he was seeing her for the first time. "Thank you," he whispered. "You shouldn't have stopped." Ava wiped blood from her hands. Someone had to. She thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Days later, a black car waited outside her building. A man in a tailored suit approached her. "My employer would like to speak with you," he said politely. Ava hesitated. "About what?" "About the choice you made," the man replied. They took her somewhere underground. Quiet. Secure. The man she had saved sat across from her now, healthy, eyes sharp. "You were fired unfairly," he said. Ava stiffened. "You don't know me." "I know enough," he replied. "You had nothing to gain by helping me, and everything to lose." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents. Names. Numbers. Opportunities. "I need someone I can trust," he said. "And I don't trust people who've always had power. I trust people who know what it feels like to lose it." Ava closed the folder. "What's the catch?" she asked. The man smiled faintly. "You disappear." And she did. She trained. Learned languages. Strategy. Finance. Discipline. She stopped being a waitress. She became something else entirely. Years later, standing outside the Grand Elon with coffee soaking her uniform, Ava remembered that promise. Disappear. She sent one final message. Ava. She recognized me. The reply came instantly. Good. That means she'll never see you coming. Ava removed her apron, folded it neatly, and placed it beside the steps. The waitress everyone thought was nothing was gone, and she wasn't coming back as one. Ava ceased to exist on paper the same night she disappeared. No social media updates. No employment records. No forwarding address. To the world she had failed, drifted, vanished into the quiet mass of people who never made it. That illusion was carefully constructed and very expensive. The man she saved was called Mr. Kovac. That was not his real name. In the private underground facility where Ava was taken, names were treated like currency, used only when necessary, discarded when dangerous. The building had no windows, no signs, and no visible security. Yet nothing happened there without permission. Ava learned that on her first day. Sit, Mr. Kovac said, gesturing to a chair across from him. She did. A dozen screens lined the wall behind him, each showing live footage from different cities. Ports, banks, restaurants, offices, places where decisions were made quietly. You were a waitress, he said. Yes. You were invisible. Yes. That is why you are valuable. Ava didn't answer. People talk in front of waitresses, Mr. Kovac continued. They brag. They confess. They underestimate. You've already been trained for this world. You just didn't know it. He slid a tablet toward her. On it were numbers. Holdings. Companies layered on top of companies, all owned by trusts that led nowhere. An empire built to be unseen. This is what keeps cities running, he said calmly. Food, energy, shipping, waste, finance. Nothing glamorous. Everything essential. Ava scrolled slowly, absorbing the scale. This isn't legal, she said. Mr. Kovac smiled. Neither is survival. Her training began that night. Not with weapons. With silence. For months, Ava observed. She learned how meetings worked, what was said, what was meant, what was never said at all. She learned how men lied without moving their mouths. How power shifted through tone instead of volume. She studied finance until numbers stopped being abstract and became weapons. She learned logistics. How one delayed shipment could collapse a rival. How one signed contract could save thousands without anyone knowing why. Languages followed. Korean, Serbian, Mandarin. Not fluency at first, just enough to listen. You don't need to speak much, Mr. Kovac told her. You need to understand everything. Years passed. Ava grew sharper, colder when necessary, precise always. And when Mr. Kovac died quietly in his sleep, the empire did not fall. It waited. They tested her next. A border dispute. A rival syndicate pushing into one of their ports. The old guard wanted retaliation. Ava studied the numbers. No violence, she said. They laughed. 3 weeks later, the rival ran out of fuel, lost insurance coverage, and had their accounts flagged simultaneously across 3 countries. They pulled back without understanding why. The room fell silent. From that day on, they stopped calling her the girl. They called her Ava. By the time she returned to the city where Serena Vale ruled her small kingdom, Ava owned pieces of it, quietly. Vale Dining Group's supply chain ran through 2 distributors Ava controlled. The bank Serena trusted most answered to a holding company Ava sat on the board of, under a different name. Even the building Grand Elon stood in belonged to a real estate trust Ava had acquired 6 months earlier. Serena had never noticed. People like Serena didn't look down far enough. Ava watched from the shadows as Serena expanded, cruel and careless, burning bridges she didn't realize were load-bearing. When Ava requested placement at Grand Elon, some objected. Too exposed, one advisor warned. Ava shook her head. I need her to see me. You could destroy her without stepping inside. I know, Ava replied. But this isn't destruction yet. This is education. So she put on the uniform again. The weight of it felt lighter than before. On the night Serena ordered her dragged out, Ava had already signed the final document transferring Vale Dining Group's debt from one lender to another. Her lender. The humiliation was expected. Necessary. Back in her apartment now. No longer small, no longer temporary. Ava stood by the window overlooking the city. Lights blinked like signals, each one connected to something she controlled. Her phone buzzed. Advisor. She took the bait. Ava typed back. Ava. Good. Proceed with phase 1. She turned away from the window and poured herself a drink. Something aged, something rare. Tomorrow, Serena would wake up to find a contract delayed, a call unanswered, a meeting canceled without explanation. Small things. People never feared small things. They should. Ava raised her glass slightly, a quiet toast to the woman who had thrown coffee on her, and believed that was the end of the story. Serena thought power was loud. Ava knew better. Power was invisible, until it wasn't. And the empire she ruled had been built by people no one ever saw coming. Serena Vale woke up on Tuesday morning irritated for no clear reason. The light filtering through the floor-to-ceiling windows of her penthouse felt harsher than usual. Her phone buzzed with calendar reminders, meetings stacked back-to-back, investor calls, a lunch reservation she had waited weeks to secure. It should have felt satisfying. Instead, something felt off. She pushed the feeling aside and reached for her phone. 3 missed calls, all from her bank. Serena frowned. Banks did not call their clients this early unless something had gone wrong. She returned the call while walking toward the kitchen, already planning which assistant she would blame for the inconvenience. Ms. Vale, the banker said, voice unusually formal. There's been a temporary hold placed on one of your primary accounts. Serena stopped walking. Excuse me. It's procedural, he continued quickly. A routine compliance review. It should be resolved soon. Soon is not an answer, Serena snapped. That account funds payroll. I understand, he said, sounding less certain than he should. We'll be in touch. The line went dead. Serena stared at her phone, jaw tight. By noon, 2 meetings had been canceled. One investor claimed travel issues. Another's assistant said they'd reschedule. No dates were offered. At Grand Elon, the floor manager approached her carefully. Our seafood delivery didn't arrive, he said. Supplier says there's been a delay at the port. Serena exhaled sharply. Then call another supplier. They all route through the same distributor. Serena felt a prickle of irritation. Since when? Since last quarter, he replied quietly. You approved the change. She waved him off, already dialing numbers. No one answered. By evening, rumors began circulating. A vendor requested upfront payment. Unusual. A landlord hinted at reviewing lease terms. An insurance representative asked questions Serena didn't like. Still, nothing was dramatic. Nothing she could point to and say this is the problem. That unsettled her more than a crisis ever could. Across the city, Ava watched the data flow calmly. She didn't smile. This wasn't pleasure. It was alignment. Phase 1 is complete, her advisor reported. She's confused, not alarmed. Good, Ava replied. Confusion makes people reckless. The next few days unfolded like a slow tightening. Serena's personal driver quit without notice. Her publicist stopped returning calls. A journalist emailed questions about labor complaints from years ago, claims Serena dismissed as nonsense, yet somehow backed by documentation. She slammed her laptop shut. Who was doing this? She demanded during an emergency meeting. Her executives exchanged glances. No one obvious, one said carefully. It's indirect. Serena's grip tightened on her pen. She hated indirect. She needed a face, a name. And then, in the quiet space between one canceled meeting and another unanswered call, a memory surfaced, uninvited. A waitress. Dark eyes. Calm voice. Coffee dripping from her uniform. Ava. Serena shook her head. Ridiculous. People like that didn't orchestrate collapses. They suffered them. Yet the thought lingered longer than it should have. That night, Serena stood alone in her office after everyone had gone, city lights reflecting in the glass. She poured herself a drink, hands trembling slightly. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. We should talk. Serena frowned. Who is this? She typed. A response came almost instantly. Someone who can stop what's happening. Her pulse quickened. When? Tomorrow. Private. You choose the place. Serena exhaled slowly, relief and suspicion mixing. Finally, a solution. She typed back an address. Exclusive, discreet, expensive. She straightened, confidence returning. Whoever was behind this wanted something. That meant she still had leverage. Across the city, Ava received the confirmation. She placed her phone face down on the table. Prepare the room, she said calmly. And notify security. One advisor hesitated. Are you sure you want to meet her now? Ava looked up, expression unreadable. She ordered guards to drag me out, she said. She deserves to see who's been holding the door. Outside, Rain began to fall, soft, relentless. By morning, Serena would step into a room believing she was about to negotiate. She had no idea she was walking into her own reckoning. The private lounge was small, dimly lit, yet exuded an understated luxury. Velvet chairs lined the walls, soft lights spilling from brass sconces. A single table rested in the center, polished wood reflecting the subtle glow above. No cameras, no staff, no interruptions. Just two women and the weight of years between them. Serena Vale arrived first, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her posture was rigid, mask flawless. Her silk blouse was crisp, her jewelry strategically subtle, but her hands betrayed a slight tremor, whether from anticipation, irritation, or instinctive fear, she wasn't sure. Across the room, Ava sat in silence. The same woman Serena had thrown coffee on, the same girl she had humiliated, was now calm, poised, untouchable. Her black suit hugged her frame like armor, her posture impeccable, her eyes calm yet piercing. There was no uniform, no apron, just power, radiating from someone who had built an empire in the shadows while Serena had laughed at her. Serena stopped a few feet from the table, scanning the room quickly. "You," she started, voice clipped, then faltered. The words felt smaller than she intended. "You're still working here?" Ava's lips curved ever so slightly. "I came back," she said softly. "For closure." Serena blinked, then laughed nervously. "Closure? You were fired. Years ago. I didn't think. You underestimated me," Ava interrupted. Her voice was calm, measured, but each word carried weight. "You thought I would crumble. You thought I would disappear quietly. And yet, here we are." The words hit Serena with the force of truth she wasn't ready to face. Her guards stood stiffly behind her, hands near their belts, confused. Who was really in control here? Ava leaned slightly forward, placing her hands on the table. "Do you remember that night?" she asked, voice soft but cutting. "The steak dinner. The accusation you made. The laughter. The coffee." Serena's eyes widened. I was," her voice faltered. She searched for a defense. "I was justified. Justified." Ava's voice sharpened. "You humiliated me in front of everyone. You destroyed my reputation. You thought a little laugh, a little power display, could erase me. You were wrong." Silence filled the room. Serena could feel the shift, an invisible current tightening around her chest. She glanced at Ava's hands resting on the table. They were unarmed, but she felt as though a dozen knives could pierce her from their composure alone. "I don't understand," Serena whispered finally. You've changed. But you're just a girl. You couldn't have, possibly." Ava smiled faintly, almost pitying. "I've changed, yes. But I'm still the same girl who once worked quietly, unnoticed, underestimated. Only now, I have the leverage you never imagined." She slid a thin folder across the table toward Serena. "Everything you've built. Every deal, every bank account, every property tied to your little empire, it's all mapped. And most of it connected to me." Serena's hands shook as she opened the folder. Each page contained contracts, transaction histories, legal documents, details that connected her empire to holdings controlled by Ava. Each number, each transfer, each signature was a thread woven into Ava's silent web. You can't," Serena's voice broke. "How did you?" Ava interrupted, voice calm, commanding. "I told you I disappeared. You laughed at me. You threw coffee on me. And yet you never stopped believing that power came from visibility, from arrogance, from noise." Serena's eyes flicked to Ava. You're a billionaire? Mafia queen." Ava leaned back slightly, letting the words sink in. "Titles are for people who need validation. I don't need them. But influence, control, that's real. And I've been patient." The guards shifted uneasily. The room no longer felt safe. Serena realized, too late, that the woman she had ordered dragged out years ago was no longer a victim. She was the orchestrator. Ava's voice softened. "I'm not here to destroy you. I'm here to show you the consequence of arrogance, of cruelty, of underestimating the invisible. You threw coffee on me. You humiliated me. You thought that was enough. But life has a way of balancing accounts." Serena slumped into a chair, pale, trembling. The veneer of power she wore for years had shattered in an instant. Ava didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply sat there, radiating control, waiting for Serena to comprehend the magnitude of her miscalculation. You're unreal, Serena whispered. Ava's eyes held hers. No, I'm real. And now, so are the consequences of your actions. A silence fell, thick and suffocating. Serena realized she was no longer the one holding the cards. She had been playing a game she didn't even understand. And across the table, Ava sat with the quiet patience of someone who had waited years for this moment. The next morning, Serena woke to a world that felt wrong. Her phone buzzed incessantly, calls she couldn't answer, emails she couldn't respond to, texts she didn't understand. Vendors were asking questions about payments she thought had cleared. Investors requested explanations for decisions she didn't make. Banks refused to authorize transfers without documentation she didn't have. She rushed to Grand Elon, hoping it was just a temporary glitch, perhaps a minor administrative error. Maybe, just maybe, something she could fix with her charm and authority. But the restaurant itself had subtly changed. The staff moved differently. They didn't fear her like they used to. Waiters exchanged glances before answering questions. Managers whispered quietly to each other when she passed. Even the head chef, normally loyal to her whims, hesitated before approving the menu. Serena's heart thumped. Something was wrong. She couldn't see it yet, but instinct told her the ground beneath her empire was shifting. Later, in her office, the first document arrived, a legal notice from a corporate lawyer. It was brief, effective immediately. The Vail Dining Group's holdings and supply chains have been transferred to an external trust. For inquiries, contact the trustee directly. Her hands shook as she read. Impossible, she muttered aloud. I control everything. Yet she didn't. Every hidden connection, every supplier she trusted, every financial flow, everything had been quietly rerouted. And she had no clue who had orchestrated it. Across the city, Ava sipped her coffee in her office overlooking the skyline. Calm, precise, untouchable. Phase 2, she asked her advisor. Yes, ma'am. All assets are secured. They've begun reaching out for explanations. Good, Ava replied. Let them flail. Let them panic. Let them feel the weight of what they underestimated. Back in Grand Elon, Serena's pride slowly unraveled into panic. Calls went unanswered. Vendors threatened legal action, and investors quietly withdrew. A loyal board member approached her with a document she could barely read, a loan default notice, triggered automatically due to non-compliance with trust regulations. Her empire was crumbling, not violently, not with explosions or confrontations, but quietly, methodically. Every misstep, every lack of control, every moment of arrogance was being punished. She realized, finally, who was responsible. Her fingers shook as she typed a message. Ava. No reply came. Of course it didn't. Ava wasn't here to answer. Ava didn't need to. Hours later, Serena received a physical invitation, a simple card delivered by hand. No signature, no logo, just her name in bold. Meet me where it all began. You need to see what you've created. Fear prickled at Serena's skin. She hesitated, but curiosity and arrogance pushed her forward. The meeting room was the same one from before. Ava waited, serene, commanding. You've learned, Ava said softly, that the world doesn't bend for arrogance. That power is earned, not inherited. That cruelty carries interest. Serena swallowed. Please don't ruin me. Ava shook her head. I'm not ruining you. You're doing that yourself. Every deal you ignored, every person you underestimated, every insult you threw. They've been repaid quietly. Without noise, without spectacle, but the outcome is the same. The room seemed to shrink around Serena. The arrogance that had once been her armor was gone, replaced with dread. Ava leaned forward. I am not your enemy. I am the consequence of your choices. And now, you have a choice. Serena's eyes flicked to the folder Ava placed before her, the one outlining every financial, legal, and personal misstep connected to the woman she humiliated years ago. You could walk away, Ava said. Admit that power isn't yours to wield recklessly. Or you can continue. And I assure you, the next phase won't be quiet. Serena's mind raced. Pride battled survival instinct. But she realized the truth. She had lost. Not because she was weak, but because she had always underestimated people like Ava. People who the world ignored, dismissed, and humiliated. The room was silent, heavy with inevitability. Ava didn't need to raise her voice. She didn't need to strike. Her presence alone was enough. Mercy, Ava said quietly, is only given to those who respect it. Serena slumped, the weight of years of arrogance and cruelty finally settling on her shoulders. Outside, Ava's network moved silently. The remnants of Serena's influence were dismantled, not publicly, not violently, just systematically. Employees loyal to Ava ensured that Serena's allies abandoned her. Suppliers redirected resources. Banks froze inaccessible funds. Every action calculated. Every move precise. By the end of the week, Serena was alone in her penthouse. The city below still thrummed with life, but her empire, once untouchable, was now intangible, a ghost of her former authority. And Ava? She didn't celebrate. She observed. Every step, every adjustment, every subtle nudge was part of a larger lesson, not just for Serena, but for everyone watching. Because power, true power, was invisible until it wasn't. And Ava, once a waitress dismissed and humiliated, was now the queen everyone feared quietly. The city was awake, buzzing, oblivious. Lights flickered across skyscrapers, traffic hummed through narrow streets, and people went about their lives unaware that one of their most infamous socialites had fallen, quietly but completely, and one woman they had never seen coming had risen. Ava stepped out of the black car, her heels clicking against the polished steps of a luxury conference hall. Cameras flashed, not from paparazzi, but from executives, journalists, and investors attending the unveiling of a new investment trust. She didn't glance at them. She didn't need to. Every eye in the room would follow her whether she wanted it or not. Years ago, the same city had laughed at her, ignored her, humiliated her. Today, it would watch her ascend. Inside, the air was electric. Ava was the last person anyone expected to step into that space as the billionaire, the strategist, the silent queen who now controlled empires Serena Vale had once claimed as her own. The projector lit up behind her. Charts, graphs, global holdings, investment strategies, supply chains, businesses acquired discreetly, debts realigned, assets consolidated. Every move Ava had orchestrated during her years in the shadows was now laid bare. Journalists whispered. Executives exchanged stunned looks. A room full of powerful men and women who had never noticed her before suddenly realized they had underestimated someone who had been invisible. Ava's voice cut through the murmurs, calm, confident, commanding. "Good morning," she said, her eyes scanning the room. "I am Ava Thompson. And for those of you who don't know me yet, I've been working quietly for years to ensure that business, finance, and strategy are not reserved for those loud enough to demand attention, but for those smart enough to earn it." Some of them stifled laughter. Some frowned. Some scanned their phones, unsure if this was real. She paused. "Many people have underestimated me before. Some of them are here today, and that is fine. Because what matters is not who notices you, but what you do while they don't." The room fell silent. Ava's gaze shifted to the back, where a small section of VIP attendees had gathered. Serena Vale sat there, pale, stiff, still in designer clothing, but stripped of the authority she once wielded with ease. Ava didn't smile. She didn't need to. Serena had already seen the consequences of arrogance, of cruelty, of underestimating someone invisible. Years ago, Ava continued, I was dismissed, humiliated, and told I had no place in this world. I accepted that lesson, and I prepared myself, not for revenge, but for what I was always capable of achieving. Charts shifted to show key acquisitions, some subtle, some undeniable. Each one mapped a web of control that Serena had never imagined. Suppliers, banks, real estate, international shipping, logistics networks, even media channels, all quietly under Ava's direction. Power, Ava said softly, is not taken in a moment. It is built quietly, with patience, intelligence, and resilience. And once it is built, it cannot be ignored. Serena's face remained pale, but the weight of understanding settled in. The woman she had dragged out like trash, thrown coffee on, humiliated, had become the architect of the very world Serena had once ruled. Quietly, flawlessly, invisibly. Ava concluded, voice strong. I did not come for revenge. I came to rise. To prove that those who are underestimated, those who are ignored are often the ones shaping the future. To those who watched me, laughed at me, or dismissed me, I am Ava Thompson, and I am here to stay. Applause erupted, not for Serena, not for the empire she once commanded, but for the woman who had clawed her way from nothing, who had been unseen, and who had now claimed her place as queen. Outside, the city moved on, unaware of the quiet revolution that had taken place. But those who had been foolish enough to underestimate her would remember. Serena left the room that day knowing she had lost everything, not with a bang, but with the quiet inevitability of a tide that had been coming for years. Ava did not gloat, did not celebrate publicly. She had already ascended, and the city now bent, slowly, to the gravity of her presence. The waitress everyone once thought was nothing had become the billionaire Mafia queen. And in the quiet moments, when she returned to her office overlooking the skyline, Ava allowed herself the smallest smile. Not for revenge, not for power, for finally being seen, on her own terms.